Undertaker is one of 10 playable Nightfarers in Elden Ring Night Reign, and she is an aggression machine. If you play her right, you can get some absolutely stupendous amount of damage. Hi boys, I'm Chris Crass. I played a ton of Undertaker, and today I'm here to show you why she's actually OP. Grab your glass necklace, gamers, and let's get straight into it. Also, I have a Discord server linked in the description, so feel free to join if you have any questions or just like vibing while playing Souls games. Double also, if I sound like ass, it's cause I'm a bit sick at the moment. First things first, I want to mention that in this video, I will mainly be focusing on Depth 5 trio play, and that I'll be covering specifically melee Undertaker, as that's how I personally play her. This video isn't to say there is a correct way to play her, I just think that she's incredibly underrated, and that her kit can do so much more than it leads most to believe. With that said, 1. Her character skill, Trance. By itself, Trance activates auto run, increases damage up to 21%, increases damage negation by 35%, enhances the dodge, and refills your entire stamina bar. Now that last part is what I want to focus on. When watching other creators, they often like to mention maintaining uptime. I don't disagree with this, but I feel like people tend to underestimate just how much utility an insta stamina button provides. For example, when up against slower opponents, during big strafes, or even something as simple as the boss being locked onto someone else, you can deplete your entire stamina bar with your attacks before immediately refilling it for more, allowing you to maximize the damage from that particular punish window, or at least be extra greedy and still have the chance to dodge. Like, no damage is being lost here. You are still landing your shots, and if anything, you make more use out of it as your skill is activated mid-swing instead of at range. Doing this can also increase your damage by like, a lot, once you factor in her character-specific relics, like the glass necklace, where you can get 3 stacks of multi-hit before popping the skill. This ensures both damage buffs are active at the same time, and on top of making it last for the longest amount of time. Chain attack finishers is also great for this. For example, if you use Trance early, landing an entire R1 chain will most likely deplete all of your stamina, forcing you to wait for it to refill, which can potentially lead to losing your multi-hit stacks. Instead, by proccing the buff in your usual state, you can activate Trance to refill your stamina to full to immediately start swinging and make the most of the buff. Combine both of these relics, and man, that's a 70% damage increase. Another reason you shouldn't always immediately activate your skill is during riposte animations. By allowing your teammate to take the crit, you are free to spam attacks to your heart's content and more, which works extremely well with high stamina consuming weapons such as dual colossal jumping attacks, where you'll get way more value out of the opening as opposed to using it early. It's also great for resurrecting allies and for skill spam. I feel like so many people tend to use Trance right before engaging in combat and end up losing out on so much value. To show you what I mean, here's a side-by-side comparison. And heads up, this isn't even counting the ult or other things which can make it snowball even harder. Aside from maintaining aggression, it also provides quite a bit of utility. For example, did you know that spamming the Trance dodge is actually as fast, if not slightly faster than super sprinting? The dodge distance actually goes far enough that it can genuinely keep up. For this exact purpose, if I haven't used it already, I like to make a habit of using the skill the moment I know an attack is coming. That way, I'm able to easily chase after a boss in the event of a fade attack, or spam dodge away if the boss suddenly does any sort of get off me attack. Prime examples being Fardis' Roar, ED Dog's triple head slam, BBK's whirlwind attack, Tree Spirit explosion, and much more. Best case scenario, I evade the attack completely without a scratch. Worst case scenario, I get hit, but the 39% damage negation kicks in, which might make the difference between life and death. Either way, I genuinely feel like it's just a good habit to have, as activating the skill actively forces me to stop pressing R1 and mentally prepare myself to dodge, which can drastically lower the chances of mistiming a roll. Moving forward, when dodging attacks normally, try to avoid purely rolling forwards, as the distance can lead to accidentally rolling past your target or messing up the camera, especially if the boss is a small humanoid, such as Bell-Bearing Hunter or Holster. If possible, try to use it as a repositioning tool to place yourself in a spot where you can bait out favorable attacks or within a boss's specific blind spot. For example, for Draconic, I like rolling to the shield side, as it baits out the various shield attacks that can continuously be jump punished. For Fardis, I like to get to his insect ass, as nothing but the roar can reach me there. For Artorias, that's backwards, as his long-range attacks are his longest punish windows. Anyways, yeah, learning how to properly manage when and where to activate Trance is a highly crucial skill to master when playing Undertaker. The ability may be simple, but making sure you extract every ounce of value from it is a completely different story. I can talk about this skill all day, but honestly, I think it's time we move on. 2. Her ultimate, Loathsome Hex. By itself, her ult turns you into a high-speed, hard-hitting torpedo, which does more damage than the vast majority of ults, and can also be activated by rolling grabs or if any nearby ally uses their ult. This alone already makes it sound pretty damn good. But what if I told you that you could take this even further? 2.1, the relics. Say hello to these gems right here. Alt readies character skill, and alt creates damage buff, both of which are must needs in my opinion. Regarding the first one, we've literally just had an entire segment on why Trance is so good. So naturally, having the ability to instantly refill it is absolutely insane. Also, if you use your alt while already in Trance, the skill will instantly refill the moment the current Trance ends. Pair that with the fact that you regain stamina just by using the ultimate, and you can literally double extend your combos. Which is basically, attack until you lose all stamina, use Trance to refill stamina to keep on attacking, use ult to reset both stamina and Trance, keep attacking, and use Trance one more time to keep on going.
I think I have literally been attacking for like 60 seconds straight. Like,
effectively allowing you to attack 4 times longer than any other character without ever needing to take a break to refill stamina. Moving on, that second relic is just icing on the cake, buffing all your damage by 18% for a whole last 40 seconds. Combining that with all the other buffs we covered in the previous segment, and that brings our total to a 100% damage increase. Mix that in with unrelenting aggression and your bottomless pit of stamina, and dude, you're dealing the damage of 2 people with the stamina of 4. What makes it even better is that since it doesn't even consume the entire bar, pairing it with any form of defeating enemies refills art gauge basically ensures that you get at least 1 ult per boss encounter, if the constant aggro didn't already refill it. Basically guaranteeing an 18% damage buff every single time you encounter another boss, which is kind of insane, especially for getting set up before night 3. On top of all of this, I'm not even factoring in grab ults or assisted ults, which can also trigger both relic effects. So realistically, these effects are even better than I've already mentioned. 2.2, the tech. Now, this ult itself is already known for being one of the fastest, but guess what? There's a way to make it even faster. You might have noticed that throughout the video, the way I use my ult is a bit different to how someone would use it normally, and that's for good reason, as this allows me to be even more aggressive than I already am. To properly explain why and how that works, there's 2 pieces of tech I'd like to present. The first is the jump tech. This one is as simple as it sounds. Simply jump before pressing the alt. And I don't mean jump and alt. I mean jump ult. By pressing both buttons in such rapid succession that it doesn't even look like you jumped. Now, there's 4 reasons why you want to do this. The first and main reason is the speed increase. I ran several tests at close, mid, and far range, and on average, using this strategy causes the ult to land 15% faster than normal. The second reason is the range increase. Since this can be cast while in midair, we can employ the help of sprint jumping to sneak in a bit of extra distance for the same amount of time. The third reason is that it drastically reduces the chance of you being blocked by random obstacles or terrain. And finally, it's just really satisfying. Meow. Moving on, we have the backflip tech. You know how Undertaker likes to do this thing where she jumps backwards immediately after landing the ult? Well, that puts us further away from the boss and low-key kills our momentum. Instead, we can make it so that we backflip towards the boss, eliminating the space in between and allowing us to immediately begin attacking before we land. To execute this, here's a step-by-step guide. Step 1. Land your ult. Step 2. Immediately after impact, unlock your camera and press back on your keyboard or controller. Step 3. The moment you are in the falling animation, you are free to lock back on. I assure you, this is really not as hard or as precise as it looks, and that once you get the muscle memory down, it's there forever and honestly feels super satisfying to execute. For me personally, this tech was an absolute game changer. By arriving immediately after the ult ends, I'm able to punish the boss right before it gets up, and at minimum, always land at least 2 free attacks, which can snowball really quickly, as it vastly increases the chance of proccing my multi-hit and chain attack relics, and of course, feeding into my aggression addiction. You might be thinking, why not just hold forwards after using the ult? It puts me right in front of the target anyway. Well, that's because you're using it against the test dummy. Realistically, the boss will stagger backwards in response to an ult, or in the case of smaller bosses, be completely blown away, which can create even more distance and cause you to lose precious time. The backwards tech removes this issue as it ensures that you'll always at least be in front or at the enemy's side. Combine both of these techniques together, and you can save up to a whole second while in battle. And in a game as fast-paced as Night Rain, you know there are moments that could have played out completely differently if you were just a second faster. I first found out about this tech while watching a Pyke analysis video, and man, this has made playing the character even more satisfying than it already is. Make sure to check him out if you haven't already. Bro's content is peak. 2.3. The strats. As incredible as this ultimate already is, there are still quite a few ways you can sneak in even more value by using it in creative yet calculated ways. To explain what I mean, here's 4 strats I frequently use whenever I'm playing Undertaker. 1. Lineups. Even though it doesn't cover quite as much range as Iron Eyes, it still does more damage, and the amount of damage dealt is the same regardless if you hit them or pass through them. For this reason, simple lineups can provide just as much or even more value. Common situations where I find myself doing it include when fighting multiple invaders, piercing the boss on my way to resurrecting an ally, rezzing 2 single boy allies before their timer runs out, piercing multiple targets in multi-boss fights, general damage, and my personal favorite, instantly clearing O'Neill's troops as soon as he summons them. Absolute cinema. 2. Advanced speed and tracking. Okay. I know it may seem like I'm pointing out the obvious, but have you ever thought about taking it to the absolute extreme? Sure, it already rivals Iron Eye's ult in its utility to cancel boss super moves, but there are 2 crucial things that it can do that Iron Eye's can't. That being, it can be used while jumping, and that it can be curved. If you can't see why that's insane, I'll be happy to explain. For one, using the momentum of sprint jumping, you can use it to cancel boss attacks incredibly quickly. Like so fast, it almost looks instantaneous. On top of this, due to its crazy tracking, you'll most likely still catch your target even if it suddenly dashes to the side. But that's not the best part. If there's one thing I can confidently say Undertaker is the absolute best at, it's canceling airborne attacks. I say this because unlike Iron Eye, she has no delay, she doesn't have to get in position, and can stun things directly above and or behind her. Think about it, just how many attacks do you know that happen to drastically drag out the length of the fight just because the boss is in the air and nobody can reach it? Got your answer? Well, it's even more than that. Flying Dragon Carpet Bomb, Dragonkin Flying Slam, Moose Airwalk, Caligo's Flying Ultimate, Demon Princess Wing Flap, Centipede Demon Mega Jump, King of the Storm's Flying Combo, Gaping Dragon's Jump Attack, Adele's Dive Bomb, and all of this is just random shit I came out with in 5 minutes. I swear, the amount of times I've made a boss T-pose in midair while using this ult is laughable. While you're at it, you might as well go ahead and land a headshot as well. For those who don't know, it is especially common for larger bosses to have what is known as a headshot multiplier. In this game, that number is often 30%. Basically making it so that any attacks dealt to the head will take 30% increased damage, stance damage, and status buildup. With most ults, their AoEs are often way too big to reliably aim. Undertaker's is precise enough to consistently exploit this weakness. It can be a bit more difficult to land on targets such as Falling Star Beast, Tree Spirits, Dragonkin, and Ancestor Spirits, as you can lock onto their heads, but for the bosses whose heads you can lock onto, such as Deathbirds and especially any kind of dragon, it goes kind of insane. Like, you can literally be right under the boss, run, jump outside to ult it in the face really quick, and return back to your previous position. It's crazy high value for crazy low effort. 3. The movement. Take a look at these clips. Now tell me that doesn't look fun. But yeah, in all seriousness no, besides being very satisfying to pull off, it can be pretty handy to save a few seconds in between bosses, especially if you run a spell relic. More on that in a bit. 4. Assisted ults. In fights like Everdark Pest, ED Caligo, ED Adele, and regular Libra, who all have moves that can be devastating if not cancelled, it can be a pain if there are less than 2 people with viable damaging ultimates to negate them. However, with Undertaker and a bit of coordination, this is not an issue in the slightest. Whether it be Duchess, Recluse, or Scholar, if you guys can agree on a set time to use it, you might as well have 3 people with viable damaging ults. For example, on this specific Libra fight, I told my Recluse that on the second bubble, I'll use my ult, and that on the third, she should use hers. By coordinating this beforehand, Recluse will know not to use her ult prematurely and save it for the third bubble, leading us to successfully avoid Golden Libra 3 times in a row and ending the fight before he can enter the phase even once. It can also be used in reverse. For example, I often like to initiate fights with my ult to proc the damage buff. However, if a teammate tells me they're going to use their ult immediately, I'll use the assisted ult to proc the buff, and save mine to either cancel attacks later on in the fight, or double extend my combos. With that said, what about those who do have quick damaging ults like Wilder and Iron Eye? Well, in that case, make sure you complement them by performing a double stun. What do I mean by this? Well, you know how using your ult immediately after a teammate uses theirs makes your assisted ult feel hollow? This is because bosses can only be ult stunned once every few seconds, and only regain the ability to stun a little after the animation ends, or a bit after they return to idle. This duration often lasts a few seconds, but can vary slightly from boss to boss. For this exact reason, by delaying your ults as long as you can, or at least until the previous animation ends, you can stun the boss for a second time, giving your teammates an even larger window to wail on the boss. Since the assisted ults last for exactly 4 seconds before fizzling out, what I personally like to do is count to 3 before activating the ult, making sure I delay it as long as possible. Though sometimes, I'd also take it one step further by super spinning away, using the distance for an even larger delay. 3. The alternate ult or enhanced trance. For those who don't know, if you have both basic skill and ultimate available to you, by pressing these 3 buttons in quick succession, you can activate what I like to call the enhanced trance or alternate ult. What it basically does is give you an auto dodge for about 15 seconds. If you were like me, you'd think, I'm already competent in my dodges. What the hell would I need an auto dodge for? But then you think about it a bit more, and then you realize it goes kinda crazy in very specific scenarios. Exhibit A. Glass cannon enemies. A very good example of this are invaders. Defeating them at low levels yield very high rewards in the form of purple weapons and a lot of runes. They don't take too long to kill, but can easily one-shot you if you're not careful. However, with the help of the alternate ult, you can easily annoy the shit out of 2 of them at once to draw their attention. 15 seconds is way more than enough time for your teammates to gank and finish off at least one of them, or for you to finish off one on your own. This is especially effective against the bullet hell boss that is the Recluse NPC. Take away her magic spam, and she's actually really squishy, so much so that I find that 15 seconds is more than enough to solo her all by myself before returning to the team. Another great example is during DLC invasions. Against Doggo, bro is literally so squishy that I like popping the ult to eliminate him as fast as I can without worrying about the little dogs or accidentally missing a roll. Same with Balancers. It often likes to surround itself with a bunch of annoying enemies, so I like to use the ability really quick to pop in and pop out. Against Caligo, you could use it to avoid the ice shower while running towards it. Finally, there are also certain bosses I like to use them on. Bosses that aren't super tanky but can rip you apart if you're not careful. The ones that fall into this ballpark mainly include Royal Revenants, Red Wolves, Black Knives, and Leonine. Probably also some sort of Ruin boss if you're doing it at low level. I also particularly like to use it against the Curseblade in Night 1 during the Lion Knight and Curseblade fight, eliminating the guy super early on in the fight so that the whole team can have their full focus on the Lion Knight. Exhibit B, Mosh Pit. Kinda similar to a previous point of mine. This skill is also pretty nice for traversing through areas with high enemy density, making it pretty good for drawing aggro and for retrieval missions. Say you or an ally dies in an area filled with enemies, but accidentally aggro the boss. That's fine. Just pop the ability really quick to grab what's yours and dip. As for the boss side of things, you can use it during ED Doggo's split phase to either draw their attention or for general survival. As for ED Libra, specifically when he preaches madness, you can basically walk up to him and spam R1. No matter what he throws at you or how many NPCs gank you, you are getting that madness proc. Also, I assume it's really good for clearing the Libra NPCs, the same way it's good for the Night Invaders. Exhibit C, Dodging Undodgeable Attacks. Now, of course, this ability can be used to survive large AoEs such as ED Maris's Waves and ED Pest's Orbital Laser. But did you know they can also be used to dodge attacks that are specifically designed not to be iframed? For example, we have the iframe eaters such as Artorias' Front Flips, and ED Balancer's Bloom Attack that literally cannot be dodged using normal means. However, somehow, with this ability, it's possible. For me personally, I also like to use it whenever I go against Moog when he summons his mini tridents. I draw Moog's attention away to one side so my teammates can create a safe space on the other. I try to get to the pocket before the mini tridents detonate, but if I don't make it, I can just pop the alternate ult to avoid the AoE entirely. Exhibit D, the Tech. Okay, but before I say anything, take a look at this. Basically, since the ability is an auto dodge, attacking immediately afterwards triggers a rolling attack, which often comes out incredibly fast. If you use it against combo strings you specifically know will hit you in rapid succession, you can deal stupid amounts of burst damage, especially if you have a heavier weapon, basically using it to punish moves that would normally be impossible to punish. Also, fun fact, it guarantees grab dodges if any are present. Another scenario you could use it in is when using really long Ashes of War. For example, weapons like Cranial Vessel Stand or Malekith's Blackblade. These weapons deal the majority of their damage near the start of the animation, but have a long recovery as a drawback. However, by using the alternate alt mid animation, you can use it to both regenerate stamina and avoid the side effects of the recoil.
Anyways, yeah, I don't use the alternate alt nearly as much as I use the regular alt or skill. But that's not to say it doesn't have their uses. In situations where it can be useful, it is very useful. I don't see many people use it, if not at all, so I just wanted to give you guys some ideas and examples of what it can do. 4. The build. Okay, now that we've fully covered her entire kit, let's talk build creation. Or rather, just mine. First things first, here's my personal build that I run on Undertaker. Bear in mind, I've been playing this game for a while, so my relics might look better than most. Also, I know you have questions, I'll get to that in a second. This part is what I'm gonna assume to be the most controversial part of the video, so I'm mentally preparing myself here. Anyways, let's start with the regular relics. First things first, unless you have some sort of crazy god roll, I believe that the glass necklace is kind of a must-have, as the ultimate art and successive attack relics by themselves already increase your damage output by a max of around 43%. Also, that 10% ult regen is a pretty nice touch. Anyways, this is genuinely one of the best talismans you can have on her, and I wish I had more to talk about it. To be honest, the numbers just speak for themselves. Moving on, the chain attack finisher's relic effect is something I genuinely feel is underutilized in the community. Basically how it works is that by landing the final attack in an R1 or L1 chain, you get a 16% damage buff for 20 seconds. You might think, oh, when the hell am I gonna land a whole ass R1 chain? 1. Large and slow enemies. They are full of blind spots or have slow recovery. Use these to swing away. 2. Strafes. They can be used to create blind spots and or extend your punish window's duration. 3. Aggro switches. Is the boss looking at someone else? Capitalize. 4. Stance breaks. By letting your teammate take the crit, this should create more than enough time to land an entire chain. Just get creative, dog. Use the poise from Trance to sneak in the final attack. Make educated guesses and just wail on the boss. Or use your knowledge of scripted openings to your advantage. On top of all of this, I also have tech for it, but I'll be covering that in a later segment. But for now, know that you're not proccing one relic effect at a time. While you're doing this, you're also building up your successive attacks. 16% doesn't sound like much, but it can snowball massively when combined with other relic effects. For example, adding that to our previous 43% brings us to a 66% increase. Next up, we have the incantation and relic effect, which is also super underrated in my opinion. What it does is that by using any buff incantation, you will receive a 19% physical damage buff for 60 seconds. Yes, you heard me right. Nearly 20% more damage for a whole ass minute. Add that to the list, and that 66% turns into a 97% without the character skill and 139% with the character skill. Bro, literally all you need to do is to use the spell once before the fight starts, and if it's not a night boss or night lord, it'll most likely last the entire fight and more. You don't even have to keep up the pressure like the rest of the relic effects. Plus, if it ever runs out, you can just reapply it for another full minute. It's crazy. Yes, Undertaker doesn't start with a seal, and yes, you will have to go out and find one, but the chances of finding one is not low at all. Literally, any support-based incant can trigger this effect. This includes weapon buffs, aura buffs, body buffs, and even heal spells for some reason. To find them, seal checks include all these POIs, certain starting camps, and that one specific seal shack on the top left for some reason. And that's assuming you're not running dormant seals or have Revenant as a teammate. That said, for anyone who's struggling to find seals, I'll be making a dedicated seal check video for every POI once I'm done with this one. Note that it might not be out on the day of this video's release, but that it'll be linked as soon as it's done. Anyways, once you do get the seal you need, not only will you have the buff from the relic effect, you also get the buff from the incantation itself. On the low end, you find something like Flame Fortification on Caligo, which sucks, but you mainly got it for the relic effect anyway. However, on the high end, you find something like Golden Vow or Flame Grant Me Strength, and at that point, your damage numbers become absolutely stupid. Just kidding, the spell I had was Barrier of Gold. Here, I want to mention the remembrance item the relic shows up on, being the Leather Monocle Case. One of its effects is Extended Spell Duration, which basically extends the effect of whatever buff you used by 50%, which goes incredibly hard if you happen to find a really good buff like Golden Vow. It also opens the door to an otherwise ignored perk, that being Sorcery and Incantation Duration. Like bro, finding this dormant power can be game changing. This one time, I got Order's Blade with it and casted the buff before fighting Loretta. From there, I beat her, looted the dormant power, waited for the night boss to spawn, and it was still on. Also, the relic's third effect is an extra 6% physical damage. Nice. In conclusion, use this relic for big damage. If you still aren't convinced, well, jingle jingle jingle. Moving on to the deep relics, the first one I want to cover is the improved Dex relic. What this does specifically is decrease your vigor by 5 and faith by 13, while increasing your dexterity by 19. Basically lowering your HP by about 10% in exchange for better scaling with most weapons. If you can, you should definitely run this relic. Since melee infusions aren't a thing in this game, you'll come across a lot more quality weapons, aka most of them. This includes straight swords, great swords, heavy thrusting swords, curved great swords, twin blades, axes, any kind of spear, halberds, and of course fist weapons. Even if you aren't using a quality weapon, most strength-oriented weapons will gain at least a small boost in damage, and most dex-oriented weapons become at least somewhat usable. Next up, the Alt Ready's character skill is of course a must-need. As I've stated before, this gives you the ability to double extend your combos, which is what allows you to attack 4 times longer than anyone else, and is crazy good for keeping up pressure. Otherwise, it just guarantees a double stamina bar refill, which is also really good for keeping up pressure, especially when you factor in assisted ults. If I could somehow improve my build in any way, I guess I'd like Night Invader since I fight them every other game, partial HP to offset greed, dormant seals for convenience, and defeating enemies +1 to complement my +0. That said, I am more than happy with my current setup. However, if you guys somehow have these in combination with any of the relics I've highlighted, definitely consider them. Anyways, yeah. You might notice all the physical attack ups +4, and that's because personally, I like to play Undertaker as an R1, R2 aggression machine, and that in my opinion, that's what she's best at. I'm not sure if this is a hot take or not, but the way I see it, Undertaker is a buff stacking character, and the way her skills and character-specific relics are designed reflect that. Many of them, in some way, shape, or form, are connected to maintaining aggression and constantly attacking, which her kit complements perfectly. I believe that Undertaker's greatest strength is her ability to dish out unrelenting aggression, on top of being able to snowball her damage using said aggression. This is why I haven't mentioned anything like double balancers. It's cause I don't think she works as well with that playstyle. Sure, she can spam skills for longer, but she can't duplicate the damage like Duchess, nor does she always have a good one on hand like Executor. Plus, this also takes away her ability to snowball her damage, as not every skill can reliably proc successive attacks, and also because she is literally incapable of using Glass Necklace with double balancers. The aggression build, however, is something that's unique to her, and is also something no other character can make use of, which sets her apart. Oh yeah, it also outdamages pure ISA, so just wanted to mention that. Lastly, I know some of you guys have been staring at my double dormant shields, and to be honest, there's no reason behind this. I usually just like to use whatever weapon I happen to find, so I don't really care about dormants at all. These effects just happen to be on relics I felt had the least amount of drawbacks. 5. How to buff stack. A common mistake I made while learning this character earlier on was that even though I was aware how high the multipliers can go, I only ever stacked all of them, quote unquote, whenever I could, or whenever it was safe, quote unquote. And while playing like that, she was fine. However, I then soon realized that to make her amazing, you should actively try to have all buffs active at the same time as often as you can. You go from, hey, that's pretty good damage, to, holy crap, my R1s deal yellow damage to a D5 Night Lord. Anyways, in this segment, I hope to not only teach you how to build up crazy damage, but to show you how to be max buff consistently and get a million screenshots you can flex to your friends. Starting things off, let's talk about the sequence, aka the order in which the effect should be procced. This is important as you want maximum overlap, where all buffs are active for the longest amount of time. To do this, I like to start from the buffs with the longest duration to the shortest duration. The sequence goes as follows: the spell buff, ultimate art, chain attack finishers, trance, and finally, constant aggression. Starting with the spell buff, this one's the easiest to proc. All you really need to be able to do is to cast the spell a single time before the fight starts and you're good. This should never be a problem, as long as you remember to touch the grace after every encounter. Next up is the ultimate, which is often what I like to use to initiate the fight. Because the ult itself doesn't deplete much of the gauge, and because attacking a lot refills the gauge really quickly, I find that I always have another ult ready in between fights. And if I didn't, I'd just kill a few trash mobs nearby. Trash mobs are absolutely everywhere in this game, and even though I only have defeating enemies +0 with nothing else, it's still super easy. Also, if you play in VCs, you can ask your ally for an assisted ult to proc the buff instead. Moving on, we have chain attack finishers. And I'm not gonna lie, this is probably the trickiest one. Many people have asked me, are you sure this is something you can consistently proc in just any fight? And I'm not gonna lie, for a while, I thought just like that. However, after playing for a bit, I can confidently say it's way more achievable than you think. I've already mentioned large enemies, strafes, aggro switches, and stance breaks, so here I'll focus more on aggressive proccing. Firstly, I want to mention that only the very last hit has to connect to proc the buff. No other hit has to land besides the last one. For this reason, whenever the boss is slightly out of reach but not aggroed onto you, which trust me happens a lot in this 3-player game, you can choose to continue swinging. Although it may look like you are blatantly throwing on the surface, the idea is to slowly inch your way towards the boss and land the last hit. Sure, you might have missed hit 2 and 3, but if hit number 4 connects, then it was all worth it. You can also apply this principle to moving enemies. If you know the boss's moveset or how it behaves, you can make educated guesses on whether or not to reposition or to keep on swinging, as it is possible to predict that the boss will basically walk into your attack. Another thing that can be a great help in aggressive proccing is the poise you get from Trance. I haven't mentioned it up until now, but Undertaker actually takes 0% poise damage while in Trance, and that it's actually super underrated for proccing chain attack finishers specifically. All we ever really need to do is tank 1 or 2 hits. Hear me out. There are many boss attacks in this game, where although the recovery is slow, landing a full chain attack is just barely out of reach. However, with Trance, this becomes way more possible. If you know an attack is coming, you can press Trance right before the attack hits you to refill stamina, negate damage, and poise through the attack. All you need is to hold out until the very last hit before going back to dodging everything. You may be thinking, hey, I've seen Undertaker be blown away before while in Trance. Are you sure it works? And to that I say, absolutely. You see, in this game, bosses have certain moves called poise ignoring attacks that will knock you down regardless of your poise value. Now of course, trying our strategy on an attack like this won't work. However, it is not that much of a problem, as it is very obvious if an attack ignores poise or not, as 99% of the time, they are slow-moving big slam-down type attacks, or they come from some huge enemy. Like a stomp from a 70-ton scorpion, of course that's gonna knock you down. A butt slam from a giant walking tree? Duh. A body slam from a giant worm thing. What do you think? If you notice any attacks of that nature, simply dodge and save Trance for something else. That something else being literally every other move. This includes Storm Stomps, Adele's Roar, Adele's Lightning AoE, slaps from Greg, attacks from Fulgore, attacks from Holster, etc. Wait, what was I talking about again? Oh yeah, the fourth layer of the buff stacking setup is to simply hit Trance. Just as I've stated at the start of the video, you want to try to deplete your stamina until empty, or at least as close as possible to it. Even though you can get an extra stack right then and there, you still want to reap the values of your instant stamina button. Though, if it's to proc chain attack finishers, it's totally understandable. Anyways, yeah, once Trance is popped, you'll naturally get 2 stacks just by attacking. So we can just move on straight to the final step. Finally, the last step is constant aggression. I say this because at this point, that's all you really need to do. All the buffs that need a specific activation have been triggered, and now it's time to put it to good use. That said, beside making the most of your damage, there's a reason why you want to keep up aggression. One is the Trance Excessive, which isn't hard to proc, but the other is actually the successive attacks portion of the glass necklace. I'll put the specifics on screen, but basically, you gotta keep attacking to not only build up stacks, but also to make sure they stay active, as there is a decay rate working against you. This decay rate is constantly active and does not get paused by attacking, only counteracted. Each tier you cross, the decay rate becomes stronger and harder to maintain. Alright, cool. Now that I've explained the last step, this should be more than enough to take on any daytime fight. The spell and ult buff should last more than enough to end the fight outright or deal most of the boss's HP. Chain attack finishers or Trance might run out, but they are either always available to reproc or on a short cooldown. For longer fights, such as night bosses and night lords, the first 2 buffs do tend to run out, but really not much has changed. Just remember to cast your spell every now and again, and you should be good. One last tip, whenever presented with a free opening, land chain attack finishers, as it's the hardest one to proc, but also, cause R1 spam in general is really good for building successive stacks for both the glass necklace and Trance if it's active. TLDR, in this Demon Prince clip you're currently watching, all I needed to do was land a single chain attack before continuing to spam heavies. Instead, I landed heavies all the way and lost out on a lot of damage without realizing it. Now watching it back, this clip low-key infuriates me. Anyways, that should be buff stacking covered. I know I've been talking about this for like 5 minutes straight, but I assure you it's really not as complicated as it sounds. If I'm being completely honest, 90% of the time it's just knowing the order of the sequence and then throwing hands. It can seem tedious at first, but trust me, you actually get used to it really quickly. Like, as of recording this, I've taught this to several of my friends, and they all had it ingrained in their muscle memory by the start of day 2. If that still doesn't convince you, think of it like this. Every time I do one step of the sequence, woo, big number go up. Bigger number, bigger damage. And then, woo, is that yellow damage on a D5 boss? Monkey pleased. But then, woo, monkey sees 6 or more damage stacks. Monkey unlocks infinite dopamine loop. 6. Miscellaneous tips and tech. Now with all the main chunks fully covered, I'll be using this segment to leave my smaller yet still useful tips. Chain attack finisher setup tech. Remember gamers, it's only the last hit of the chain that has to land for the effect to proc. By taking advantage of this, I've managed to come up with a simple setup. That is, to walk up to any stationary target, backstab 4 times, and immediately spam R1. This will cause you to do a backstab attack that will chain into the rest of your weapon's combo. By doing this, you make sure that only the very last attack in your combo chain connects with the enemy, allowing you to proc the buff using trash mobs without accidentally killing them, and letting you begin the boss fight with the effect already active. I use this tech all the time on crabs before fighting basement boss, but you can use it on any other stationary target, such as land squirts. So far, this force backstab method works with the starting hammer, colossal weapons, and greatswords. If you have any specific weapon in mind, feel free to try it out on the training dummy. Fight initiators. While falling after using the ult or while using jump attacks, consider using jumping R1s instead of jumping R2s. This is because they chain directly into the combo string with minimal delay, unlike jumping R2s, which are much slower, allowing you to proc your successive attack buffs a bit faster. Secondly, when closing distance, or if the boss moves away while you're in trance, consider dashing forwards instead of running towards the boss. This is because the dash goes really far, but also, since rolling attacks are generally faster than R1s, it can be better for maintaining aggression and building successive stacks, especially with heavier weapons. Another trance-related fact, although you are stuck in auto run while it's active, you are not forced to do running attacks, allowing you to instantly turn your body and attack in any direction you like while maintaining your speed, which can be pretty good for free aiming. That said, if you would like to do a running attack for whatever reason, you can still do it by holding B on your controller. Disable cinematic effects. You know the weird camera zoom effect that happens whenever you use her ult? Well, if you don't like it, you can turn it off by going to your camera options and disabling cinematic effects. This causes the camera to be way more fixed during flight and impact, which can make things easier to see or less confusing. I guess it also helps with aiming if you're mid-ult. Also, yes, it works with other characters. Taking damage boosts damage negation. Although the damage negation at full weapon buff is still the best for overall survivability, if I had more than one and my teammate didn't, I'd gladly take it for a taking damage boost negation passive instead, as my trance can cover for my lack of negation and trigger the effect. Don't riposte. If you're an Undertaker, you should actively try not to take the riposte and give it to your teammates. By doing this, you can use the free opening to either wail on the boss using jump attacks or proc chain attack finishers. That said, only do this if you know if there's someone else to take it. If there isn't anyone else present, don't be an ass and just do it. The Super Torpedo. Remember how I said her ult is one of the harder hitting ones? Well, I take that back. Her ult is the single most damaging ult in the entire game, and it's not even close. To help you understand, memorize this number. Firstly, since the ult buff happens as soon as the button is pressed, the ult will always deal that 18% more damage regardless. And then, once you factor in the fact that her ult is purely physical damage, which is what her buff stacking specializes in, you get this. And by the way, this is just with my regular relics. Adding all the physical attack buff plus 4 in my deep relics, and... yeah, I've been hitting bosses with the force of a ballistic missile, and I didn't even realize until just recently. The fact that this ult only consumes 40% of the gauge is f***ing crazy. It's even crazier considering the fact that you can communicate with your teammates to specifically give you an ult when you have high damage stacks. Increase max stamina. During the day, while fighting bosses and collecting passives, if you happen to have mediocre choices of buffs and weapons, consider choosing the Increase Max Stamina buff, as Trance increases its value exponentially compared to anyone else, especially if you're using something like Dual Colossals. Also, because in a way, it helps solve for time a bit more while your Trance is on cooldown, as you have more stamina to burn. Fun fact, if you ever wondered why Trance sometimes doesn't refill your stamina to max, it's not because the refill has a flat amount, it's just that it also accounts for negative stamina, which is basically whenever you use more than you have in your green bar. For example, if I use dual colossal jumping attacks with only 1 stamina left, it'll take a bit more before it starts regenerating again, which wouldn't have happened if I did have enough stamina. Although brief, this pause can be deadly, as it prevents you from running or rolling away, which is also why attacking until 0 is so dangerous. For anyone who isn't Undertaker, of course. Trance just kind of removes this issue. Anyways, yeah, the formula is, Trance refills 100% of your max stamina, plus any negative stamina you may have. Successive attack quirks and weapons. Remember how back in the buff stacking segment, I mentioned that the successive attacks relic effect decays the stronger it gets? Well, I'm making this segment now long after I've collected most of my footage, and I'm just now figuring out that some weapons are just heavily disadvantaged because of this aspect. Take for example, single colossals. Because they hit so slow, their cumulative value per second, aka what builds successive stacks, is absolute trash, requiring a total of 18 R1s back to back just to get the max of 3 stacks, which is virtually impossible. To put that into perspective, the Greatsword only requires 11 hits to reach max stacks on top of being way faster. The reason why this is so bad is because since successive attacks get stronger with every tier, not being able to utilize the third tier by itself causes you to miss out on 9% extra damage. And if you can't reach the second tier, that's another 6.5% more damage lost on top of that. In conclusion, don't use single colossals. You may have seen me use it throughout the video, and that's because at the time, I just wasn't aware I was shooting myself in the foot. Another thing to keep in mind when playing Undertaker is to specifically beware the wing sword insignia. I know, it sounds strange, but for whatever reason, equipping this doubles your cumulative value decay rate, causing your stacks to deplete twice as fast and be extremely hard to maintain. Note that other multi-hit related items, such as the Thorny Crack Tier or Millicent's Prosthesis, do not have this issue. It's just the Wing Sword insignia. So instead, consider giving it to your friendly neighborhood Iron Eye. Anyways, once I figured this stuff out, I then decided to do a bit more experimenting with other weapons that uses Undertaker to see what else I might find. Eventually, I came up with this rough spreadsheet. On the lower end, we have the single Great Spear and very unfortunately, the single Colossal Swords. These weapons are just as bad, if not worse than the single Colossal weapon, as they require 3 hits just to proc the first tier, around 6 to proc the second tier, and about 15 to proc the third tier, which starts to get really bad once you start factoring in their stamina cost. Moving on, we have the mid tiers. These weapons aren't the fastest thing ever, but they're very reasonable to work with, and the stamina cost is manageable. This tier includes the Great Sword, Great Axe, Great Hammer, and Halberd, who can all proc the third tier within 3 chains, or around 10 to 11 hits. They're all fairly equal in speed, though Great Axes and Great Hammers might be preferred due to their higher strength scaling. After this, we have what I'm gonna call the fast tier, and here I'm gonna go from slowest to fastest. Starting this off, we have the Hammer, which can proc tier 3 within 3 chains, or around 8 hits. Then, we have Axes and Straight Swords that can comfortably do it within 2 chains, and are also around 8 hits. Fist R1s are also here, as they can proc the buff in exactly 1 chain, though the full chain is quite long. Finally, the fastest base moveset goes to the Twin Blade, able to proc it in 4 inputs before it even completes a single chain. With all of that said, I do want you guys to know that these tests have been done strictly with 2-handed R1s, and that each weapon within the same category can vary between one another. Like for example, the Ruin's Greatsword requires 3 more hits to proc the third tier compared to other Colossal Swords, and that the Envoy's Longhorn requires only 10 hits compared to the usual 11. However, I do want to mention that in this game, there are also crazy exceptions. 1. The Starfist and Iron Balls tap R2, which can proc them all in just 3 taps, because of course it can. 2. Star Scourge Greatsword, which can proc in just 2 hits, assuming there's only 1 target. No surprises there. You know what did surprise me though? 3. Godslayer's Greatsword, who can proc all 3 tiers in just 5 hits. Oh my god, bro, that's my goat. Every other Colossal Sword, this alone makes me content. Anyways, that's all I cared to find, so I'll be leaving my spreadsheet in the video's description. However, if you want to test it out for yourself, here are the steps. 1. Only equip the glass necklace. 2. Go to the training ground. 3. Check the damage of your weapon and multiply it by 1.218. 4. Attack until you see that number. Unfortunately, the testing process is pretty tedious and inconvenient, as for some reason, the game refuses to show a damage buff icon when gaining stacks. You flash red once, and that's all. Getting to 3 stacks has no visual difference, so it's really hard to tell mid-game. FromSoft, please fix this. Power stancing. Notice how in the previous segment I was throwing around the word single a lot? Well, that's because once you start power stancing, all that I said earlier doesn't matter anymore. I tested these 6 power stance weapon combinations, and literally every single one of them can proc successive in 4 inputs, which is massively faster than most 2-handed movesets, which includes the Colossal variant. Single Colossal weapons, absolute dog F tier. Dual Colossals, f***ing broken. There is no in between. Find this big chunk of metal a friend, or use something else. Anyways, yeah, power stancing weapons are crazy good on Undertaker. You deal high damage, and the downside of using them are heavily reduced because of Trance. If you find a Raider, Milder, or Bird Knight Invader once, you're kinda set for the rest of the run. And that's assuming you don't run any specific dormants. With that in mind, remember to use the standing L1 chain from time to time. It might not have as much DPS as spamming jump attacks, but it sets up chain attack finishers and builds successive stacks way faster. 7. Downsides. Now, even with everything I've said up until now, no character is without its flaws. Kinda weird to talk about what Undertaker's bad at near the end of the video where I'm supposed to talk about how great she is, but I do want to make sure everyone watching this goes in knowing fully how great she can be and what things she struggles with when trying her out. 7.1. Aggression is a requirement. When playing this character, maintaining aggression is key. As I said in the build segment, her greatest strength is her ability to snowball her damage to astronomical heights and to continue attacking long after that damage has been achieved. Imagine you're playing Devil May Cry, I guess. If you're like me and love constantly being in the boss's face and never backing down, her relics and kit will complement your playstyle perfectly, as she'll be super rewarding to play. However, because her kit is centered around constant aggression, those who prefer a more passive playstyle might not enjoy playing her as much, because to use her to her full potential, you need to attack for all her buffs to proc, and you need to keep attacking to make sure they don't run out, all while trying not to get greedy and be punished for it. As amazing as Undertaker's damage is, if not maintained, you're not going to get as much value as you should be. In my opinion, a passive Undertaker is essentially a worse Wilder. 7.2. Heavy relic requirements. Although Undertaker has really good guaranteed relics in the form of the glass necklace and monocle, I do understand that a lot of the tech I've mentioned in this video does assume you have most of her character's specific relics. So unfortunately, if you don't already have them, and would like to use everything I mentioned in this video, you might need to spend a bit more time in the expedition or in the shop. Some people like to point at this and say, oh, she's useless without her relics. Wilder doesn't need this to be viable. And although I do agree that she's strongest when you have all of them, the fact that you can consistently get 4 to 6 damage stacks on you every single game is very charming to me. Like, she is the buff stacking character. She might be weaker than most in her base state, but when fully utilized, she becomes an absolute monster. Don't you think that's at least a little cool? 7.3. Ankle breaking. This is more of a pet peeve some people have rather than something I personally have an issue with. Basically, while running, if you change directions too quickly, your character might do this weird ankle break animation. And although brief, this prevents you from dodging and kills your momentum, which can be deadly if it happens at a bad time. And since you're running around constantly while you're in trance, this might occur much more often. I guess it can be annoying if you're not careful, but I don't know, man. This issue can be completely avoided by simply dodging in the other direction, quickly turning around, or super sprinting. 6.4. At reviving. Alright, this is the big one. As much as I absolutely adore this character, I will wholeheartedly admit that her ability to revive is absolute dookie, and is in my opinion, her greatest flaw. Although she can instantly res a 1-bar with her ult, any more than that, and she immediately starts struggling. Unlike Wilder, Raider, Executor, and Iron Eye, who all at least have ults that can res 2 bars or more, Undertaker unfortunately has to rely solely on her weapons to deal the bulk of her revive damage. Sure, you can make an argument that her alternate ult circumvents this issue, but it's just not enough. Using it early prevents you from instantly refilling your stamina, which you need to keep on hitting the corpse, and even though the auto dodge might prevent you from dying, if the boss decides to guard your corpse, each hit will push you further away from the body, on top of delaying your stamina regen. Conclusion. Overall, I believe that Undertaker is a super underrated buff stacking character that rewards extremely aggressive playstyles and has lots of tech. She might be a bit hard to grasp at first, but in the right hands, she can deal some insane levels of damage while being super satisfying to play. I hope this has convinced at least some of you to try her out in the depths, and to those who already do play her, I hope you all find some of the tech interesting or discovered something new about her while watching this video. And yeah, that should be the Undertaker guide done. If you enjoyed it, consider liking and subscribing. It supports the channel and helps me feed my cat. You can also go one step further if you like, by supporting me via super thanks in the YouTube comments, or by supporting me on my Patreon page, linked in the description. This is the first ever character guide I've ever made, so I would love to know what y'all think of this video in the comments below. Was it good? Was it trash? Should I make more of these? Let me know. Anyways, yeah, here's a clip of me attacking for 40 seconds straight while playing as Undertaker, and I hope you all have a great day.